Hey, Jordan Belfort here again. Welcome back to the Straight Line Persuasion Fast Track, a system designed to teach any person how to truly become a world-class closer, which in my book means being able to close anyone who's closable. So now that you have an introduction to the system, I want to dig a little bit deeper here and go into a subject here that I'm sure it's a word that you've heard before, but in my book, it's one of the most misunderstood or misused words in the English language, and that is this idea of getting into rapport with people. And that's what this module is going to focus on, how to get into rapport on both a conscious and an unconscious level. Now, in the last module, if you recall, we went through these three basic tenets of the straight line system. And this is really what I said to my brokers right from the gate when I said to them that, listen, every sale is the same. Every sale, every negotiation, every situation of influence, every single one is exactly the same. And I gave them these three basic tenets of the system. And I drew that straight line on the board. Let's put up a graphic here where I put the straight line on the board. And I said there's an open and there's a close. And your job essentially is to move your client down the straight line from the open to the close. And as you're doing that, you're building up this massive certainty, right? Both emotional and logical certainty. Then you have these boundaries above and below the line. And that represents being in control of the sale. So you have the boundary above, and if you go past that, you're in Pluto. Then you have the boundary below, and if you go past that one, you're in Uranus, right? Not a good place to be. And that essentially is the first basic tenet of straight line persuasion. And that is that you must control the linguistic encounter. You have to control the sale. If the customer or the prospect is controlling the sale, good luck trying to close them. So again, we have to immediately get in control of that sale. That's the first basic tenet. And the second tenet, once we're in control, we then get into this immediate, this conscious and unconscious rapport. Okay, and at the highest level, remember what you're trying to establish in the prospect's mind essentially is that you are a person worth listening to. And really higher even than that, if you want to chunk it up, is that because you're a person that can help them achieve their goals. You can help them get what they want. And without being in rapport with somebody, it's very, very difficult to influence anybody to do anything. So that's your second basic tenet of the straight line system. So number one, you want to control that sale. Number two, you got to get it to instant rapport on both a conscious and an unconscious level. And that leads us to the third tenet of straight line persuasion on the front end. And that is once you're in rapport, you use that rapport to now gather intelligence. And notice when I talk about gathering intelligence, when we're in straight line intelligence gathering mode, it's not just about identifying needs. It's about their pain points. It's about their beliefs. It's about understanding their values, their hierarchy of values. As a straight line prospector, when you're qualifying and you're gathering that intelligence, it is absolutely crucial that you dig deeper than the average salesperson ever would. Because once you truly understand what a person's core needs are, what their pain points are, where their values lie, what their highest value is, it then allows you essentially to design, essentially to retrofit your solution to meet their needs, to solve their pain. And also, it allows you then to take them out of the loop. It means they don't qualify or you can't help them have the money, whatever it might be, then you want to get them out of the sales funnel. See, what happens very often with people who have not been through straight line training, they will let anybody go down the sales funnel. They don't care if the person really needs it, qualifies or not. They get to pitch that person no matter what. And that's a big waste of time. And it's also not ethical. So again, let's go again one more time. The three tenets. Number one, you want to control that sale. Okay, and that comes down to being an expert and being sharp on the ball of how you're perceived, right? And you've learned that in the last module. Number two, we got to get into that instant rapport, which we're going to go through in this module. And that means on both a conscious and an unconscious level. Conscious meaning that you're saying to us, wow, I like this person. Person's making sense. I feel like there's some likability here. They feel like they have my best interest at heart, something that they're thinking consciously. Then there's unconscious rapport where they don't know. They just get this feeling in their gut that they're in some way you're like them. They connect with you. So you want to do it consciously and unconsciously. And then the third aspect is gathering intelligence. Those three basic tenets of straight line persuasion really drive things home, and it sets you up to be able to go to the second half of the straight line where you make your presentation and you solve their pain and so on and so forth. Now, one of the things that makes the straight line system different from basically any system out there is that it's goal-oriented. And I always refer to it as goal-oriented communication, meaning There's a specific goal, an endpoint in mind, and we focus on that endpoint and we essentially work backwards. And we say to ourselves, what are the things that must line up for us to achieve that endpoint, to get to that goal every single time? And in fact, what it comes down to is actually these 5 levers, these core elements of influence that must line up in order to close a deal. And the metaphor that I always like to use is if you're a safe cracker. In the movie The Italian Job, where it's Donald Sutherland, he's one of these old-fashioned safe crackers. And what he does is he's trying to crack a safe. He puts his ear to the tumbler and he spins the dial. And he hears a click, right? And he's got the first number. But does the safe open? No. If he actually pulled the lever, it would still be locked. But does that mean he didn't make progress? No, of course he made a lot of progress. What does he do now? He spins the dial in the other direction, and then he hears a second click. Crack. Does it open? No, it's still not. There's 2 numbers. He's got 3 to go. He spins it in the other direction, and he spins it in the other direction. Finally, when he's got those 5 numbers all lined up, pulls that lever, the safe door opens. That's exactly what's going on when you take someone essentially, as he referred to it, down the straight line from the open to the close. We're actually lining up these 5 core elements of human influence that must be lined up before someone says yes. And at the heart of all this is something I mentioned before, and it's called certainty. Meaning, when you meet someone, you're trying to sell them something, and you're just immediately from the beginning, they're a prospect, right? They walk in with a certain level of certainty. I mean, it's not like they walk in like in outer space. They walk in, they know something about your product. There's some preconceived notion they have about what you're selling, what you're recommending. Imagine a continuum of certainty where you have a 1 on one end, which represents absolute uncertainty, then a line going out to the other end. You have a 10 on the other end, and that's absolute certainty. It's the best thing since sliced bread. So 1, they hate it. 10, they love it. Your goal as you're moving someone down the straight line is to get them from a 1 to a 10 in certainty, right? And I always say that sales at the highest level is the transference of emotion. And that primary emotion you're transferring is certainty. Now, there are different types of certainty. We'll get into this in the clips. There's emotional certainty and there's logical certainty. In order to close at the highest level, you got to have both. But for now, I don't want to just, overcomplicate it yet. What I want you to understand is this. There are these 5 elements, and it's based on certainty. And as you move someone down the straight line from the open to the close, what you're doing essentially is you're cracking their buying combination. You're lining up all 5 of these core elements, and when you finally do, and you ask for the order, guess what happens? They say, yeah, let's do it. So here's what we're going to do now. I want you to start by reading through the ebook chapter, which is going to reinforce these core elements of rapport, which will allow you to really stay in control and really stay in charge of the sale as you move it down the straight line. And then I'm going to focus in on these 2 other core elements of those 5. The first is called the action threshold. And what this is the level of certainty that a person must be at before they say yes. In other words, some people like myself has a very low action threshold. I don't have to be all that certain. I just have to be reasonably certain, and I'll say, yeah, let's do it. Then you have people like my father, who has a very high action threshold, and he has to be absolutely certain and damn sure of it before he'll ever have even a chance of saying yes. That's a high action threshold. Now we have people with low action thresholds out there. We have people with high action thresholds. So in this chapter, we're going to discuss the action threshold, and I'll give you some very powerful strategies of how you actually lower someone's action threshold. Then the next thing we'll talk about is the pain threshold. And this refers to essentially that when people are in pain, they're feeling some discomfort in a certain aspect of their life, especially related to your product, right, that you can fill a need that will resolve their pain, it makes people want to take action. And actually the pain threshold, it affects the action threshold. So if someone with a very high action threshold is feeling pain, it temporarily lowers their action threshold. Now, don't worry if it sounds confusing. It's actually very, very simple. And when you read this in the ebook, you're going to see just how it unfolds and how you can use these 2 of the 5 levers of influence to really get to that point where you truly can close anyone who's closable. And then next, we're going to go to a video. This is actually something that I did in Brisbane. It's a business event, a private event I did in Brisbane, where you'll actually see me talking about these 3 core elements. The first 3, because I gave you the second of the 5, I gave you action and pain, right? That's 4 and 5. Now I'm going to go through the first 3 elements. the core elements of human influence. And these are the three things that must line up in every single sale. And when you see me do this live, I would do it into a camera like this as I'm talking down to the barrel of a camera, but the truth is, I personally can't get to the same level of intensity and certainty as I can do in front of a live audience. That's why I tend to cut back to live footage when I want to really reinforce a point and bring it home for you. So this particular event here, I was really on that day, and I'm talking about these three core elements, and I'm sure that when you're done with it and you get the action threshold and pain threshold, you'll see that those 5 elements together are literally going to change your entire perspective on how you go about influencing people. And when taken in the overall context of the straight line, the impact it will have on your close rate will be truly staggering. And then finally, to help you, I'm including a visual worksheet here of how these 5 core elements work together and how you line them up to close anyone who's closable. And you might want to actually review this visual worksheet first before you read the ebook and before you view the videos, because it will give you some overall context and a framework for what you're going to actually read and watch. So why don't you take a quick look at that now? And then again, when you're done with this and you really see how these 5 elements line up, you're going to see that you truly can very quickly get to this level where you can close anyone who's closable. Now, in terms of how this relates to the overall system, the 10-part, the full immersion straight line system, again, I'm going to invite you to ultimately get to that level of mastery. But first, I want you to start with the basics here. And I want you to understand how even with just a little bit of a push here, understand the basic of the straight line, you're going to watch your closing rate soar, your sales cycle shorten, and just how your ability to get customer referrals is just enhanced so dramatically, you'll start to see the true power of the straight line system. Now, this is the first step, so I want you to enjoy it. I want you to dive into it, and I'll see you on the other side.